You are now listening to Shotgun Sports, powered by Winchester. Recorded in the U.S. and streaming all over the world. We talk to shotgun shooters from all disciplines, world-class instructors, gun clubs, target setters, vendors, and industry-leading companies that fuel the sport. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and connect with us on social media. You can also catch our episodes on shotgunsportsusa.com.
If you or your club are looking to purchase Promatic traps, make sure you get in touch with Rick Hemingway. He is the largest Promatic dealer in the country and can handle everything for you. Rick offers new and pre-owned units and exceptional service. He also has a huge rental fleet, so no job is too big or small. Rick is well known for setting championship-style targets and designing unbelievable courses, so make sure you ask him about his turnkey services for skeet, trap, and 5-stand. Contact Rick today at backwoodsquailclub.com or call 843-546-1466. My guest on the show today is a longtime shooter, a former NSCA chairman, and now the chief of operations for the NRA, along with the NRA Victory Fund. Everyone, please welcome John Commerford. Welcome to the show, John. How are you tonight?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them what you do.
My name's John Commerford. I am the Chief of Operations for the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action. That's our lobbying, government affairs, political side. The part of the NRA that deals with having lobbyists in the states on Capitol Hill and deals with civil rights related litigation to protect your Second Amendment across the country. I'm also the chairman of the NRA Victory Fund, which is something we call Super PAC. That was the entity that if you were in a battleground election state this past year, you saw some of our digital television ads, billboards, things like that. In addition, I am the past chairman of the NSCA Executive Council and the NSCA, and I've been a member of that governing body since roughly 2008 to 2010.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff going on there. You like the politics, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, how did you get into your line of work, and how did you get into shooting?
Sure. So, I grew up in Pennsville, New Jersey. So, some of you may know that town. That's where M&amp Hunting Preserve and Sporting Clays is. You know, I roughly met Anthony Matarerse Jr. for the first time probably when we started our kindergarten class. So grew up in the same town. Yeah, so
you've known him that long?
Yeah, yep. So he is.
Wow.
We graduated the same year, but he is a year and a day older than me. So if you can take what you want out of that, but
okay.
But yeah, we grew up together. You know, my dad didn't. He hunted a little bit. He was an older dad. You know, my dad had me when he was 51 years old.
Okay.
And he's since passed. And you know, just being older, what didn't necessarily have the energy or the health at the time, quite frankly, to introduce me to a lot of things. So, I actually got introduced to a lot of the shooting and hunting through Anthony, and coming to help out at M&amp, and he's the one that really kind of got me hooked on shooting and hunting, especially waterfowl hunting.
Yeah, well, there's one thing you and I've talked about this. One thing about Anthony is when he's doing something, he's at it 100%.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I mean,
no doubt about it.
I'm sure you could tell us all kind of things about the 100% Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be lying if I said his work ethic didn't influence me and help me strive to be a better employee in what I do. And, I think that kind of starts with Anthony's dad and mom as well, Anthony and Donna. I mean, they, the work ethic that they instill in their employees and their kids, it's hard not to want to strive to meet that same level.
Well, knowing Anthony that long, I know there's got to be some funny stories.
Oh God. I mean, we could be here all day. But I'll tell you the first time this is a funny one. I'm sure if he was on here, he'd want to bring this up too, because he brings it up regularly, even though now we're 35 and 36 years old. But the first time I ever went duck hunting with Anthony, it was Anthony, myself, and our friend Pat McCaffrey, who grew up with us, and Pat would go occasionally, and I don't think he's hunted since. But we went hunting out behind the marsh, behind M&amp, and the mud in the Mannington Meadow out there, which was formed from a dam being created and flooding farmland and marshland in the past. So the mud is awful. It's bottomless in certain areas, and I found that out when he specifically told me not to go somewhere, and I went there anyway, looking for a duck, and I ended up in mud, and I was in the mud up to between my nipples and my armpits, and my arms were resting in the mud, and he would hear me flailing around, saying this is the worst day of my life, and he tells that story frequently.
How'd you get out, John?
He pulled me out. Luckily, he works on a farm and he's strong, because I'm not sure how else he would have got my fat ass out of there. But we floated around ideas of unclipping waders, being drugged into the cold mud in the Northeast in the winter, or towing me out with the boat. A variety of things. Luckily, he was able to get me out.
You talking about dragging you out with a boat? And that would have been funny. That would have
been
funny.
And I'm glad that didn't happen. I can tell you that. But we've traveled a lot, and we've both in school and with getting into shooting and things like that. And I'll tell you, we've shared a hotel room, quite a bit. And one time at the Nationals, I think I told this story when I introduced him when he was inducted into the NSCA Hall of Fame. And it's one that I tell other people because it's funny, but it's also a learning experience as you share a hotel with someone for 5 or 6 days. And about day 4, I noticed that my toothbrush had been moved in the bathroom. And I asked Anthony, I said, do you move my toothbrush? Do you mess with this thing? Because you're always playing practical jokes. He goes, what are you talking about? That's my toothbrush. And let me tell you, you don't want that light bulb to come on when you realize that you've been sharing a toothbrush with someone for a few days.
Yeah. Does that immediately make you want to just throw up everywhere?
Yeah, quite a few things, to be honest with you. And, but that's part of staying in a room with this guy. I mean, one time at a shoot, he put toothpaste all under the sheet between the fitted sheet and the pull-up sheet, and put breath mints in there. So when I got out of bed in the morning, I realized that I was covered in toothpaste and breath mints. So these are interesting times traveling in a shoot with him.
All right, so you don't need to share a room with Anthony. If anybody goes to shoot, don't share a room with Anthony.
Yeah, at your own risk.
Yeah, really. That's yeah. All right, so Anthony got you into shooting, his family. And then where did that take you? Did you just start shooting tournaments with him?
Yeah, so I would start fiddling around a little bit with it. I went to college at Hofstra University on Long Island, and I started to shoot a little bit up there. There's Peconic River Sporting Clays, and then Steve Smith and Rich Lanzalotta started Mid-Hudson, so go up to shoots once in a while there. I actually had to keep my gun off campus, since it was 2.5 hours from home, at a gentleman, Nick Sunito's house, which he's since passed, but he was nice enough to keep my gun there, and I would ride with those guys to different shoots. And when I would come home, I would shoot a few of the local tournaments, and then Anthony and I would travel once in a while, whether it was to the the East Coast Championship or to going to Ohio. Went to Hillendale once, and got stranded on the side of the road at 3 a.m. when his truck decided to break down. But yeah, shot with him quite a bit, and as much as I could. Look, when I was going in college, I worked 2 jobs when I was in college. Tried to work on winter break. I would go to a temp agency and work for 3 weeks, just trying to make sure I had scratch in my pocket. I've been trying to work since I was 15 years old. So it was, my parents weren't in a position to be able to, afford to send me to travel all over, but I tried to, make as much money as I could and enjoy going to quite a few shoots that I could make it to.
And then coming on up through through shooting, you've had jobs within the industry, made a lot of good friends, and the cool story that I've heard is with you and Zach at Nationals that y'all shoot together.
Yeah. So through going to some of the bigger shoots with Anthony, I've gotten to, become good friends with a lot of his friends, whether it's, Brad Kidd or Corey Cruz and Zach. And, Zach and I have been good friends for a while now, and we started to shoot together at a few of the bigger shoots, and we started to really shoot squad together quite a bit at Nationals. And I think a few of the times that we shot together, Zach finished on the podium, and then when he won his first Nationals, we shot together. And then when he won, did the repeat, we shot together again. And then this past year, due to the election and my work requirements, I wasn't able to go. So it's always been fun to shoot with him, and we joke about this because he likes to follow me, and I think that's because I give him so many extra show birds, not intentionally, but
yeah,
just out of pure ability.
Yeah. So the 2 times he won, he was shooting behind you, and this past year, you didn't shoot with him, and he didn't win.
That's correct. So I got my marching orders. I have to shoot with him at the Nationals this year, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, he's probably already called you, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure you're going.
When we were at the Gator Cup a couple weeks ago, we lined that up, and in a weird way, it was kind of like I had the magic a couple years with just getting lucky to first. It's just lucky to shoot with guys like that and just their ability. And I think some of the better scores I've shot are just when you're in a squad like that, it elevates someone of my ability to a higher level as well. Watching those guys know exactly where their hold points are and their break points and things like that. And when we shot the last World English at Northbrook, Corey Cruz followed me as well when he won World English. So all the showbirds must work.
Yeah, they must. And that was a squad too now. I mean, you and Corey and Ant and Greg Wolf, wasn't it?
Yes. Yep.
I mean,
yeah, I think I lost by 50 birds.
So, all right. So you're into the shooting world. You made some good friends, and now you get into the working in the industry.
Yeah. So through my time when I first started with NRA, I met Dieter and Betty Krieghoff while I was on the advisory council. So through that time, got to meet a lot of good people in the industry and go into the bigger shoots and hit it off with them. Had some conversations, and then I ended up leaving NRA to become assistant general manager at Krieghoff International, which is the U.S. arm of the Krieghoff company, which is where Dieter Krieghoff is based in Pennsylvania.
And what did you do for them?
So the assistant general manager role is kind of wore a lot of hats. So besides being a true utility person, it was helping manage our shooting team, helping with our advertisements and all the magazines, the marketing, working at the shows and events, working on inventory, dealing with dealers, sales, things like that.
Wow. And you leave there, and then you go to the NRA? Is that when you go back to the NRA?
Yep. So actually 2 years exactly to the day I left. I went back to NRA from the time I left.
Working for Krieghoff, what do you think that did for you in the sport?
Yeah, I think it introduced me to a totally different side of the game.
Yeah.
I think you realize if you truly love shooting, you can't necessarily take your sport or your hobby and make it your job and enjoy the sport the same. And by saying that, it's not that it's not enjoyable. You still get to have the camaraderie and build relationships even further, but you're not necessarily out there on the course competing and shooting as much as you were before. And I see that a lot. We see shooters. I'm sure people who listening to this right now know folks who they started shooting. They're recreational. They got into competitions, and then they wanted the next itch, and to scratch that was to get into the industry somehow. And then you see they start shooting a little bit less. So that's a different way to appreciate it. But it was it's a really good experience to be a part of this industry and see how much, blood, sweat, and tears folks, whether on the ammo side or the firearm side or the machines and targets, et cetera, everything that's required to make sure the sport operates and continues on.
Yeah. Did you get with the NSCA Executive Council after you worked with Krieghoff? Or were you doing that before?
Yep. So okay. I was on the advisory council when I was at NRA the first time.
Okay.
And then I stayed on during my time at Krieghoff. And then I moved on to the executive council when I went back to NRA.
Let's talk about your role with the NSCA and what you did while you were there.
My background with NSCA, I started. I had to be 22 or 23 years old when I got elected to the advisory council for the first time. And when you look back at our governance structure, it's changed a little bit in the last few years. But years ago, we had 45 members of our advisory council. So we had our regular national delegates, and then we had 15 advisory council members from industry, 15 shooters, and 15 range owners. So when I first started with the NRA, back when I was younger, I ran to get on the advisory council because I was a shooter, and I worked at M&amp Sporting Clays in New Jersey in my hometown. And I was talking to Anthony Matarerse Jr., and he thought it'd be a good idea if I got on there, and I got elected. So we started with that, and years went by, and we worked on all the various things from national NPA, the average system, which was years ago for some of you who remember that, to working on our marketing penny to establish a marketing fund. We're dealing with years of PSCA and all the different changes. So recently, we changed that structure from 45 members of the advisory council to a 15-member executive council, with the caveat of you have to run as a national delegate first. Mm-hmm. Then we use our 5 regions that everyone's familiar with for the regional championships that were established years ago instead of the zone system. And then the national delegates in that region can run to be executive council members. Once they're picked, there's one officer from every region who's elected by the EC. So that establishes chairman, vice chairman, and so on. So I was, up until the end of last year, I was NSCA chairman and worked in that role. And, I think a few of the things that the folks don't know, we have a marketing penny. Years ago, folks called it the target tax when we fought that battle to establish it. But that really does a lot of good things. It helps to offset some of the costs of our $5,000 scholarship program that goes out to really well-deserving youth shooters.
How do you get that, John?
They actually, I believe the program is running right now. Any youth shooters that listen or parents that listen and they're interested in that program, it's important to keep an eye on Target Talk. And that comes through your email. It provides a really good resource on things like that. So the open enrollment period for scholarships, I believe, is going on now, or it just ended. And once that happens, a student shooter submits their essay, a writing sample on why they are a deserving person for the scholarship amount. And that was recently, last year or the year before, increased from $2,500 to $5,000 per award. And I believe there are 4 scholarships available.
So anyway, the target tax helps with that, is what you were saying.
Yeah, it's a catchy term. It's hard not to think about it that way, but it really is. It goes for a good purpose. And in addition to that, I'm sure everyone's seen the truck and trailer that has traveled to the shoots. Obviously, last year with the challenges we faced during the COVID pandemic, and still face that wasn't as visible it was in the past, but that covered the grant program to the regionals. I don't know if everyone listening knows this, but the marketing fund provides a $10,000 grant to each of the regional events. They provide a $10,000 grant to the U.S. Open, and then it did a $10,000 grant to the World FITASC when it's in the United States, as well as the World English, as long as it's not held at the National Shooting Complex. The The clubs who get that grant, they actually have to, it's a reimbursable dollar amount. They provide what they are going to do to enhance hospitality, have Friday welcome parties or Saturday dinner enhancements and other things, bottled water on the course, things like that, trying to make the shoots better for our members that are out there. And that program was such a success that it moved on to the state shoot program. Mm-hmm. So if anyone listening out there is holding a state shoot, and I know not everyone knows about this because I find it hard to believe that we only get 30 some state shoots that apply for the $2,000 grant available every year, but they can apply through the NSCA, and there's not an unlimited amount of those. So I believe there's $20,000 total dollars allocated to that. And it's a similar process, trying to help the state shoots grow. And so starting at the bottom of the state shoots and working up through the regionals, NSCA provides that grant money funded through the marketing fund.
Something I've always wondered about, John, is how do you become part of the NSCA like this? I mean, what's the first step?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the very first step is to run as a state delegate. Oftentimes in some of our states, unfortunately, there isn't even enough delegates to fill all the positions. And state delegates, it's similar to kind of the way Congress is allocated in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's based on population of members in that state. So the more members in the state, the more delegates you have, ranging from 1 to 5.
Okay.
So a state like Texas would have 5 delegates, the maximum amount, to try to provide equal representation across the whole country for those governance decisions. So every 2 years, those positions are up for election. We just had an election this past fall. Usually starts in July or August when the nominations go out. Again, that information will be in Target Talk newsletter. It comes to your email. You can sign on. I believe you have 5 NSCA members who endorse you for your run to nominate. And then it goes on the ballot. And that email ballot is sent to all of the members in the state. And the members elect those individuals. Okay. And then you can move up from there.
Okay. What's the next part? What's the next step after that once you're a delegate?
So once you're a delegate, if you want to become an executive council member, the same nomination process happens.
Okay.
And the delegates in your region, for me, it's the Northeast region, those delegates from all of those states pick from the nominees to the executive council.
What is a delegate's job?
The main role of the delegates is to vote on rule changes.
Okay.
So if the executive council passes a rule change, it goes through, it's approved, everyone votes in favor. It is sent to the delegates for their approval.
One thing with the NSCA that is interesting is how they handle disciplinary action.
Yes. So let's look at the types of complaints we deal with.
Okay.
Unsportsmanlike conduct,
mm-hmm.
Cheating, which is obviously prevalent. We hear about that a lot. Luckily, it doesn't happen as much as you would think if you read Facebook and posts on the internet. But you would think it happens at every single shoot all day, every day.
Yeah.
Thank God, because we wouldn't have time to do anything else.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the two major ones. Behavior. If someone doesn't know how to handle themselves because they're having a bad shooting day, whether they're young or old, it's just unacceptable behavior. So what happens first is a shooter, a member in good standing, or the range can provide for a complaint. That complaint is sent to NSCA. NSCA provides a case number for that, and then it moves through the process. And there's a documented process in our bylaws on how to handle complaints, which we follow to a T, because I'm sure many of you have heard sometimes these things can lead to lawyers being involved, and we want to make sure we protect the organization and in turn protect the members. Mm-hmm. But everyone's entitled to due process in these matters. We take confidentiality seriously, despite many on Facebook and the internet wanting to have a public trial by combat at times for some shooters. So it's important to keep that within the house and handle discipline in a professional manner. And most importantly, look, we want to educate these individuals who may have messed up or screwed up. It's not, and deal with habitual offenders if need be. But if someone screws up for the first time, you want to educate them and make sure they can come back and enjoy the game as well.
Yeah, that's the next thing I was going to ask. Well, I mean, how serious of offense do you have to have before you're banned or kicked out of the NSCA?
Well, it depends on the level of the offense, but there are different mechanisms from probationary period to suspension to outright bans. Luckily, you don't see many lifetime bans. What you'll see is probationary periods where if someone would violate that probation, they would face a stiffer penalty, as they should. Again, this is all to discourage unsportsmanlike behavior and cheating and things like that. It would be, trust me, everyone who spends a lot of time volunteering on the executive council would really enjoy if everyone would be 100% above board when they shoot, because it takes a lot of time from volunteers to review all of these complaints, in addition to a lot of time from the staff who have to do the bulwark of investigating everything, taking statements from witnesses to statements from the club and statements from the person who is being accused in the complaint as well.
So is every offense that is turned into the NSCA handled in the same manner?
Follow the process the same for everyone.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in, if you stand by your policies and your principles, sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do, but it always treat you right in the end. And people might not be happy in the short term, but in the long term, they should be able to respect what you did. And that goes for a shooter who just started shooting their first tournament to somebody who is very well known. Try to keep the same process.
Yeah.
And look, once that decision's been made and it's been rendered, a shooter, that's not the final say. A shooter has the right to appeal, and appeals from NSCA disciplinary decisions go to the Skeet Board from the National Skeet Shooting Association. So their EC handles NSCA appeals, and the NSCA side handles Skeet appeals. So in that case, you would think there is no the Skeet shooters more than likely don't know who this individual is, even in the highest profile cases. Whereas myself as a sporting shooter, I would generally not know who the Skeet shooters are, even in the most high profile.
John, give me your thoughts on the future of the sport.
I think we fared an extreme challenge with the COVID pandemic, both the shooters themselves, the gun clubs, and NSCA. There were some scary times, basically a year ago today, roughly, or a year ago this week, when the world sort of shut down. And I know from NRA, I know from NSCA, I know clubs. There was a lot of unanswered questions as to what was going to happen. And I think we're in an okay place. I just shot today. I had 150, 60, 70 shooters for a two separate hunter bird event at Cedar Creek Sporting Clays where Joe Skull is. Mm-hmm. I think that's really good. M&amp had their winter blast in January. 258 shooters showed up for a 1-day 100 bird event, European rotation. Mm-hmm. So just that demand, people want to get out of their house. They want to shoot. They want to enjoy the weather. They want to compete. I think there are some challenges to the sport. I think the most immediate challenge that we face is the ammo situation. Ammo is in short supply, especially centerfire metallic, but the shot shells are being severely affected. Part of that is primers. There's the availability of primers are a challenge. The manufacturing side of that is very limited, essentially to almost one location in the country making the main explosive material inside of the primer that everyone needs to make them. Mm-hmm. And I think we're in for a rough 6 to 8 months on the ammo side. I think you're going to see, I think people need to bear with their clubs, bear with the suppliers as you see different clubs limiting you, whether it's one case per transaction. And clubs need to do what they need to do to make sure they have enough ammo for these bigger shoots, especially. I know a lot of people listen to this podcast are competitive shooters. And when you go to a regional, a lot of people fly in, right? They travel. So the ammo sales are significantly higher at a regional than they are, say, use M&M as an example. The Big Seafood Blast is a big shoot, roughly 400 people plus total entries. But there's a lot of regional drivers. They drive their car. They bring their ammo. But when you have a Northeast regional, you have a U.S. Open, everyone's flying in. So you need to make sure you have enough ammo in stock to have it for the shooters that are coming. And that's, 12 gauge and sub gauge. So that's going to be a challenge in the next few months. Beyond that, and we can get into the political side when we touch a little bit more on NRA, but I think you have to watch what different states do. I don't see anything from the federal government right now that will directly impact shotgun sports in the United States. The sport in general is going to face some challenges for our European friends. There is a bit of an issue on the lead side there. They recently passed some regulations that deal with wetlands that are extremely restrictive to the point of someone could interpret it as a puddle after a rainstorm could be considered a wetlands. And you can't shoot lead ammunition into wetlands. But our international staff at NRA fully expects them to try to completely prohibit lead ammunition within the next few years. That's 2023, 2024. So that's going to be a big threat to the sport for our European friends.
What does that do for ammo companies?
Well, look, there's obviously other options. There's the most expensive, which is your tungsten based ammo, like heavy shot, things like that. Then there's steel ammo. On the centerfire side, there's copper. There's different ways around that, but specific to sporting clays, I don't know how many listeners here have tried to shoot steel shot, and I'm sure many that have waterfowl hunted know the difference. Depending on your age, you especially know the difference between steel shot and lead shot performance, right? In terms of distance. And when you shoot in the woods, steel is a whole different ballgame. It can ricochet. So it is by far and away not the same ammo that we're used to, and it's going to will create challenges. If it happens, again, they're trying, not saying it will happen, but it's not looking good there.
John, now that the election's over, there's a lot of questions coming up about the Second Amendment. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, first let me get kind of into the basic civics class here. And I think it's important because a lot of folks, read things on Facebook or the internet and they're wildly exaggerated.
Right.
Look, first and foremost, electing Joe Biden being elected president, despite statistical anomalies is what I'll call it in the vote against Donald Trump is a big hit, and it's a big threat to our Second Amendment. Losing control of the U.S. Senate through a tiebreaker with the Vice President Kamala Harris is a big threat to our Second Amendment. Having Nancy Pelosi in control of the U.S. House is a big threat to our Second Amendment. But with all of that said, for something to become law, Joe Biden can say whatever he wants to say, but it can only become law a certain way. So the White House can produce a piece of legislation, but they need to find a sponsor in the House or the Senate. So a bill can be introduced. Typically in the last few years, the House moves at a faster speed than the U.S. Senate. So a bill will go through the House. If it passes the House, it will move to the Senate. Anything that is outside of the budget process would be subject to, or could be subject to, a filibuster vote, which requires a 60-vote threshold to continue. Any bill that deals with the Second Amendment, whether that's gun bans, gun confiscation, gun taxes, background checks, things like that, they're all going to be subject to a 60-vote threshold in the U.S. Senate. Right now, there is not 60 votes for egregious gun control in the United States Senate. That's not to say it's not a threat. And that's not to say come the midterms, if they get additional gains, that is not to say it couldn't happen. The important thing is, and what you've seen is, we've heard court packing and other things. That's relying on rule changes in the Senate. And that's relying on essentially two moderate Democrat U.S. senators, Kristen Sinema from Arizona and Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Both have said that they will not vote to get rid of the legislative filibuster, which protects that 60-vote rule. And both have said they're not in favor of packing the U.S. Supreme Court, which is another way they could defeat the Second Amendment. So everyone needs to be vigilant, and we are, especially as we have gun control in the U.S. House this week with background checks and H.R. 8 and a bill to indefinitely delay background checks in H.R. 1446. Both of those will be called up for a vote on Wednesday, most likely, and pass the House of Representatives on Thursday. And then they'll move to the Senate, where a much longer debate will happen, and they will most likely sit for the next year and a half.
As far as the background checks are concerned, how long are they wanting you to wait before you can purchase a gun?
So H.R. 8 is a bill we've heard touted by Michael Bloomberg's gun control groups, Everytown for Gun Safety. That's a group that he solely funds. That deals with quote-unquote universal background checks, which is really a term for criminalizing private firearm sales. And not just sales. If you wanted to loan one of your friends a gun, loan a cousin a gun, things like that. If you have a fiance and you're not married, and you go out of town for 2 weeks and you have a handgun beside the bed for her to have self-defense while you're gone, if that handgun was used to defend herself and it wasn't transferred through a background check, you could be a criminal under that. So we have that bill, and then the other bill is something we call default proceeds. And I know this is getting a little bit technical, but it's, if you go for a background check for a firearm, you fill out a 4473, which is that long paperwork that everyone fills out at your gun dealer.
Right.
After 3 business days, if the gun dealer has not heard back from the FBI and the NICS system, they can choose to do a default proceed, which is, it's up to the dealer's discretion to transfer that firearm to you without an answer on the background check. They want to extend that period into what can become an indefinite delay. And there's a reason for 3 days. It's so the government can't perpetually delay your background checks and use that as a reason to restrict rights. And at the end of 30 days, your 4473 is voided and you have to fill out another one. So this can continue. And, as we all know, the government doesn't need another excuse to take more time filing paperwork.
Am I right when I say that if you have a carry permit, you don't have to go through all of that?
Depending on the state.
Okay.
So some states have what we call NICS exemption, which is if your permit is for 5 years or less in duration, or there's a mechanism to where you're having a background check every 5 years or less, and it meets certain requirements, you can use your concealed carry permit as the NICS background check. That's not in every state, but many states do have that.
So if your state doesn't do that and they pass this, you could wait months before you got a gun.
Yeah, so this is especially important for people with common names. John Commerford's not that common of a name. My background checks are approved very quickly. But if God forbid, your name is Mike Smith, or your name is very similar to someone who in the same state has a felony on their record, they will delay your purchase. So your dealer will say, well, your background check was delayed. At that point, they're going to do a further investigation. This just keeps a check in place for the government so they can't procrastinate on holding up your constitutional rights. They need to do their work. And in today's day and age with technology, there is no reason this should take more than 3 business days. So they can proceed with that. That's not, if a dealer decides to proceed with transferring the firearm to you after those 3 business days, if they do find something on your record where you're prohibited, they can still come find you and take the firearm back. It's not an end all be all, but this is, it's important. I think a lot of folks in the gun community see bills like this. They see HR 8 or HR 1446 and they say, well, we've heard a lot of things over the last year with Joe Biden on taxes and gun bans and things. This isn't that bad. Well, certainly it's not as egregious as a gun ban, but if you give them 1 inch, they'll take a mile. And if you move that battlefield from fighting your rights with background checks and things, the next battle is going to be background checks on buying ammo or registering your gun with the government and paying a fee and having to do training and licensing. So you have to be as vigilant right now on these bills and contacting your lawmakers as you are on the most egregious examples of infringements on your rights.
And what is the NRA doing to help combat this?
So we have an office right on Capitol Hill with a staff of federal lobbyists that are contacting lawmakers as we speak, working with a pro-gun majority to try to stop this, slow it down as much as we can. We've contacted our members, and if anybody listening isn't getting our alerts, you don't have to be a member. You can go to nraila.org and sign up for our email alerts. We're not going to fundraise and bug you for money with those. Those are simply set up to alert you in a time where you need to take action. And this is one of those times. So we activate our social media networks, and through those alerts, you can click, there's a button that says take action. You click take action, it takes you to a simple tool. It tells you exactly who your member of Congress is, who your senators are, and you can use a pre-populated multiple option letter that we've already written, or you can delete that and write your own. So it makes it as easy as possible for you to contact your elected official. That's still the most important way to get these points across, is constituent contact. If, God forbid, something like this did pass, that's when we activate our lawyers, and we work on significant Second Amendment related litigation.
Yeah, it seems to me it's like it's getting out of hand. It's just all these little things that they're trying to do to, it seems like, take your gun rights away. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying it seems like they are to the general public.
And it's not even just taking away your rights. It's trying to put hurdles in front of you exercising your rights in order to discourage you from exercising them. They want to do everything they can to slow down how many people are buying guns, buying ammo, things like that, because that's their ultimate goal. But look, we're talking about the federal government here, but in reality, and it doesn't get as much news attention, but the state level, state government work is where a bulk of what we do happens. I know there's probably some listeners in states like New York or New Jersey or California where things are tough. Where you face super majorities in the House and Senate of Democrats, anti-gun Democrats that have for years restricted the rights of these people in those states. But NRA is making big strides in a few states with constitutional carry, with expanding self-defense rights. But in the states where you have a hard time, NRA is working hard in the courts. And I just wanted to touch on, we have a case pending cert right now before the Supreme Court. And that means that we've brought a case through all the way from the district level through the circuit court level. And we are asking the court, the highest court in the land, to take a look at this case. And that case is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Corlett. That deals with concealed carry. I know this is a shotgun channel, but a lot of our NSCA members are concealed carry for self-defense. And that case deals with the reasoning that New York denies numerous permits between being a shall and a may issue state. If the Supreme Court takes that case, which we will learn most likely around April, then we would argue that case before the Supreme Court. If we get a favorable opinion there, that would not be limited just to New York. That would have implications nationwide for folks who live in restrictive states like Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Jersey, et cetera.
So that they can conceal carry.
It would set a review standard. So
Okay.
Depending on what the opinion would be, and this is why the legacy of Donald Trump, hate him or love him for how he is, he made some really big changes on the judiciary that are going to benefit everyone's rights for a long time to come. And having that final Supreme Court justice confirmed in Amy Coney Barrett is tremendous. And that'll give options on things like this. And we do something called a standard of review, which is, strict scrutiny is the ideal standard, which means the Second Amendment is essentially held as how it was written. And if you get a good opinion on a bill, on a case like this that deals with concealed carry, it's not just going to apply to that. That standard of review will be used by district courts and appellate courts on things like ammunition regulations in California and semi-auto bans and magazine capacity limits. So it's across the board. It would be a monumentous occasion depending on what the Supreme Court does with this.
Are states banning high-capacity magazines right now?
Many states do. Many states do that. Some already have arbitrary limits on the books. Some are trying to add that. Something we deal with every legislative session on the state level. If Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer had their way, they would have a 5-round magazine limit. Joe Biden had a proposal before the election to put what he called high capacity magazines, which are really standard equipment, to be subject to the National Firearms Act. So if anyone listening who has suppressors or short barrel rifles knows, you pay a $200 tax, have to be fingerprinted, and go through all these additional steps. And he wanted high capacity magazines to be included in that. And we're talking, 30-round magazines. So without that filibuster, those are real threats.
Wow. You spoke earlier about gun confiscation. How serious is that?
It's again without the filibuster, that could be a real threat. Now, when we talk about gun confiscation, I don't want you to just think I'm talking about Black Hawk helicopters flying into your neighborhood with people rappelling down to take guns. This is what we might call compensated confiscation, where the government decides to do a buyback of semi-automatic firearms that meet certain conditions, so similar to an AR-15, where they offer you whatever the government determines is an appropriate amount. Think about it as eminent domaining your rights. Mm-hmm. They come in, and just because they feel like they're buying it back from you, it's okay. So that is confiscation. It's not just, everyone thinks in the traditional sense that someone's going to knock on your door and take your guns. But if you get to the point where you have to register a gun, it makes that type of thing a lot easier. We've seen that in New York, where folks had a registered firearm, and then the state decided to make some changes, and they sent a letter to everyone who had that gun, because they know where it is, and asked you to turn it in. So that's a real concern.
Aren't there countries right now that are paying people to turn their guns in?
New Zealand, and then Canada's been working on something similar.
And if, say, someone didn't turn that gun in, what happens then?
You're subject to criminal penalties. Wow. Australia did this in the past as well. They basically rounded up all of these firearms and essentially melted them down. So there are examples of it. Now they weren't in a position where they were protected by a document such as our Constitution, and they didn't have a Second Amendment. But that's not saying, they couldn't try here.
Why is it important for someone to join the NRA?
It's critically important. I kind of consider it one of the best investments you can make for $35 or $40. You get full representation. at the state level, at the U.S. Congress, in the courts. Many people have heard our different lawsuits that are out there on different things, and this is the true lawsuits that work to protect your Second Amendment rights. I mean, we're funding those member dues go to fund numerous cases in the Ninth Circuit, which deals with California and Hawaii and all the states over there on the West Coast. But it really helps support everything that protects your Second Amendment rights. You'll hear there's a lot of gun groups out there they're smaller. They like to fundraise off of attacking NRA for various things. But they simply don't have a presence like we do. The only gun organization out there that provides for lobbyists in all 50 states and on Capitol Hill is the National Rifle Association. And hate them or love them, lobbyists are an important part of our governmental process because it gives a voice to each and every one of our members that wouldn't exist if they weren't there.
How does this all fall in line with what we do with shotguns and shotgun sports?
It's a lot of folks think when they're just because they own a shotgun, they're not lumped into the same space as someone who chooses to own handguns or AR-15s or AKs or even Ruger 10/22s. But the fact is that these people that want to come after your rights don't differentiate because you're a shotgun owner. And that's, you can look at ammunition background checks, which the folks in California are having to deal with, that the NRA is paying for the lawsuit challenging that, which will impact shotgun shooters. You can deal with lead ammunition restrictions in certain states, which impact shotgun shooters. Mm-hmm. The background check portion obviously impacts all firearm owners. Look, in Virginia, we just got done legislative session on the state level here. And one of the bills they wanted to do was requiring a background check before you could rent a firearm at a range. Now, that's not just for fees. That's if you go to your local shotgun range and you want to bring some new shooters out and you want to take a Beretta 686 off the shelf that they loan and they don't rent as long as you buy the ammo there, you wouldn't be able to do that without them having to do a background check. So that would impact a lot of new shooters learning how to shoot, which in turn would indirectly impact the sport. So there's lots of proposals that will impact shotgun shooters. And I would venture to guess that a vast majority of the listeners and shooters differentiate themselves in all the different areas of firearms.
How large is the NRA?
We have 5 million members.
Okay.
Those are 5 million dues paying members, not just folks signed up for an email list.
Who runs or who is in charge of the NRA?
Yep. So Wayne LaPierre is our CEO. He's technically our executive vice president, but effectively acts as our chief executive officer. Mm-hmm. We have a person named Carolyn Meadows, who's the president of our board. Charles Cotton, who's from Texas, who is our first vice president, and Willis Lee, who is our second vice president. So that is the main leadership of the NRA.
I couldn't imagine being one of them people right now. I mean, it would just be, so stressful, I would think, to be in one of them positions. So,
you got to respect somebody who's willing to put it all on the line, because it's not, it's a public lifestyle. You can't go to Wayne lives here in Northern Virginia where I do, and it's not exactly the most conservative area. And just having to go to the grocery store and deal with someone who would consider themselves an activist on the other side, wanting to get in your face and things like that. You got to admire the dedication to want to help all of our members. Yeah. And he's been doing it for 40 years.
That's someone that has to, really love what he's doing or really cares about this to be able to do something like that for 40 years and be put in the public eye like that.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. So I see in the news where the NRA is filed for bankruptcy. What does that mean?
Yeah, there's been a lot of news lately on that. The NRA filed for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection restructuring in Texas. That move allows the NRA to restructure in the great state of Texas and file for incorporation there. Many were surprised to hear that the NRA was incorporated in New York State. The NRA incorporated there in 1871. While we were incorporated there, our headquarters actually exists in Fairfax, Virginia. But this move allows the NRA to restructure and reincorporate in Texas. And Texas is home to over 400,000 NRA members. And I think, probably a lot of listeners to this podcast as well. And I think it's a good move for NRA to go there. The NRA is not insolvent. In fact, we're stronger financially than we've been for years. But this move will bring a stronger NRA, which will be a bigger benefit to our members.
You mentioned earlier education. What sort of education does the NRA offer?
Sure. So a big part, everybody, the news always highlights our political side, but our education and training is a huge component to what NRA does. A big part of what we do is we train the trainers. A lot of the concealed carry permits require NRA training. They have NRA instructors out there. We train law enforcement. We train military. That's just a huge part of what we do, and both online training and in-person training. And I think at a time where it's been reported that approximately 5 to 8 million new gunners exist, I think training is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah. All right. Give me your opinion on what would happen in the next couple of years.
In regards to political government affairs side?
Yeah. What do you think will be, in the next couple of years or next, 4 years, I guess you want to say? What all do you think will take place and what won't take place?
I think it's going to be a long slog out between now and the midterm election in 2022. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to see the Democrats push continued gun control in the U.S. House. There's the big push that I touched on deals with there's kind of a rush in the House because any legislation that passed in a prior Congress, if brought up before April 1, doesn't have to go through the committee process. So it moves a little bit faster, but it will slow down greatly in the U.S. Senate. Depending on what their priorities are, and when you have a new administration, they always want to. They have their own priorities, and they try to undo their predecessors' priorities. So there's a lot on the plate for Joe Biden, but our issue, the Second Amendment, is one of his issues. But I think that the push now is to work on the midterm election, identify those 5 to 8 million new gun owners, make sure they're registered to vote, make sure gun owners and hunters and shooters that are out there now are registered to vote and educated in the process, so they're ready to make a decision before the midterm election. Look, there's a lot of gun owners and new gunners in suburban areas that may be ready to re-engage in the political process with new candidates out there, especially when they may have voted for Joe Biden, but if he starts coming for something that's important to them, like the defense of their family, they may be willing to look at a different candidate or a Republican candidate for House or Senate. So I think there's a good chance the Republicans can take back control of the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. Typically, the opposing party from the party in power of the White House picks up significant wins in the first election. So Barack Obama lost 63 seats roughly in the U.S. House in 2010 after he was elected in 2008. Donald Trump lost 40-some seats in the U.S. House in 2018. So the trend is there and the precedent is there for Republicans to take those chambers back. And that'll really bring gridlock to the U.S. government, which isn't a bad thing for the final 2 years, hopefully, of a Biden administration.
For you not to be involved with guns much growing up, you sure are involved with it now.
I was around guns. We just weren't. It wasn't an active shooting, hunting, competition type family. But it wasn't. The area I grew up in. It's hard not to not to be around hunting and firearms. But yeah, I've been, I'm certainly fully immersed in that world now. My boss, my direct boss, Jason Wime, who's our chief lobbyist, he talks. He's from New York City and talks about how he didn't grow up with firearms at all, and he actually was an NRA member before he bought his first firearm because of the importance of self-defense and maintaining those rights. So it's an issue. Look, you can't work at NRA if you don't truly care about this issue.
Something that I've heard a lot throughout the years is that if I join the NRA, the government's going to know that I have guns.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can, all of us can wear tinfoil hats from time to time, but when you look at our membership data will be protected no matter what. That's something we protect more than anything else, is the secrecy of our members, and we're not going to give that up to anyone.
So how did you get to the position that you're in now with NRA?
I actually started at NRA when I was in college. I was an unpaid intern, and I tell this story once in a while because it puts things in perspective. A lot of people land at different places because they know someone or their parents made a call, but sometimes you can just get lucky. And I was living at the beach in the summer, and I was a first mate on a fishing boat. And I was living like a bum. I had long hair when I still could grow long hair. There's only a few left up there now.
Well, you can still grow it around the sides, can't you?
That's right. Yep, I look like Krusty the Clown. But when I realized I had a week to go before I was supposed to start my college internship program, everyone in my program had an internship lined up, and I was just counting the cash I made while fishing. Mm-hmm. So I had to shit or get off the pot, and I started calling around. I knew I liked shooting at that point, so I called NRA. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, so I called the Office of General Counsel at the NRA. They told me they didn't have any positions available. I told them I'd work for free, and they actually informed me that one of their paralegals was going on maternity leave. So I asked me if I could come interview. I drove there the next day. I bought a suit at an outlet store on my way there, interviewed and got hired as an intern. And then on my last day of my internship, the staff assistant position at NRA became available. The person put in their resignation that day, put in their 2 weeks that day. So I was able to interview with our chief lobbyist at the time, and I didn't hear from him for a couple weeks, and I was contemplating where I was going to go with life, and I was actually in line for graduation to get my diploma when they called me to offer me the job. So I literally went on Craigslist, found a room in a townhouse with 3 other random people that I didn't know because it was the cheapest place I could find. I went to Walmart and bought an air mattress and what I call modular furniture, which is really just plastic bins. And I moved to Northern Virginia and lived in that house for 5 years, actually.
Wow.
So yeah, just worked my way up there. And when I came back from my time at Krieghoff, I was a state lobbyist for NRA covering South Dakota, Kansas, and Wisconsin. And then I became our deputy managing director of all state government affairs. And then I was, lucky enough to move up into the chief of operations position a little over a year ago.
And where do you plan on going from there? Do you plan on getting any higher up in the NRA, or?
Look, I'll help out wherever they need help. It's a place I truly love working at. We have a real family environment at NRA, and I'm totally satisfied in my current role. For if I had to retire in this role, I definitely won't have any hair left by the time I retire. That's for sure. But but it's a great role. I just like to stay busy. I still go and work at M&amp Sporting Clays. Work a lot of the big shoots there. The Seafood Blast. If you come to that, if you come to the regional, you'll see me there sweating in the metal ammo building. So
hold on, Anthony has you working in the ammo building?
Yeah. Yep. I'm an ammo technician specialist at M&amp Sporting Clays. I I'm a very experienced trapper. I've spent a lot of time pulling clays there, both on the regular sporting course and the 5 stand. And then at one point, I got promoted to the ammo building.
Wow.
And that was maybe the 2011 U.S. Open was when I was promoted to the ammo building. So I'm looking at hopefully I get a decade award this year at the regional
For being the ammo technician.
Yeah, it keeps me in shape. I don't get you don't get the curvaceous physique that I have without slinging a few shells.
Yeah, I think it's time for an advancement, don't you?
No, it's fun to be up there and see everybody. And my mom still lives a mile down the road from M&amp and tends to her chickens, and it's good to get home and get to see her for a couple of days and get to see all the shooters. But it's always good to stay busy.
With all of this going on, you're as busy as you are. How do you find time to shoot, or how do you how are you staying competitive, or are you still competitive?
I just try to be in the middle of the pack in master class. I've been moved down twice, and somehow I got back just as fast to be in the middle. But it's still fun to compete. I am busy. I don't have a ton of free time, but I try to shoot some of the local shoots in the wintertime. Just shot a shoot at Cedar Creek today where Joe Skull did a great job on the targets. But coincidentally, we hired Kelby Senior, which a lot of folks on here may know from down south. He's been shooting a long time, and he's working for us at NRA, and he's doing a great job. And now that I have somebody in the office who likes to compete and quite frankly, it kicks my ass every time we go shoot. It feels like those times when I shoot with Zach and Anthony. But I've shot a little bit more this year. Last year I've shot 300 registered targets the whole year with zero practice mixed in. And this year I've already been to the Gator and shot 600 or 700 targets locally. So hopefully that'll keep up. I've wanted to shoot more this year than I have in the past. So just need to find some time to practice. But practice is hard to come by, and it's probably the most important time you need to be on the course. But look, I try to read, try to look into some of the DVDs. Anthony has his Blu-rays out there, which can be really helpful if you don't have time to get out on the course and to prep for you for your next tournament. But anytime behind the shotgun where you can pull the trigger, dead bird or lost birds is fine with me. I'm just happy to be out on the course shooting and seeing everybody that you've gotten to meet over the years, and really encouraged this year to see all the new faces on the courses. There's quite a lot of people that I've never seen before, and that means there's new shooters out there, and that's the most important thing for the health of our sport and to keep it going.
Are you going to read Anthony's new book when it comes out?
I already have read it. Sent me a copy to look over and provide edits and suggestions on, and it's quite possibly, I can't imagine anyone else doing something remotely similar to this ever again, because it is going to be essentially a Bible of sporting clay shooting. I was just thinking today, going back on a couple targets that gave me a lot of trouble, and it'd be really nice to have a bound copy of a book on the shelf where you could come home and go to that chapter and review what went wrong, what you should have done, and how you can approach that and fix it the next time around, whether it's through practice or getting back on the course. And it's really comprehensive. There's a part in there that always sticks with me since I've looked at it, and that's there's no such thing as tricky targets. There's just targets that you haven't prepared for, and that rings true at a lot of different courses you go to.
Yeah, without a doubt. Are you still shooting a Krieghoff, John?
Yes. Yep. I shoot a 32-inch Krieghoff K80 Parkour.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
And that gun came out during my time at Krieghoff, and that was a big part of our strategy at the time, was working on that gun, and quite frankly, I think that really revolutionized the K80 among sporting shooters. The KD Sporting obviously is a great gun, and then you had the Pro Sporter that came out during the high rib phase, which still the mechanics of the gun are great. I'm not a fan of high ribs solely because it makes my left eye take over. I become for some reason I see all the light through the rib, and I can't turn my left eye off when I don't have eye dominance problems with a flat rib. But that Paracore is a quick moving gun. You can add the weights to balance it, and I know they have a new version of the barrel out now. Obviously, the 34-inch, and then they have a heavier ribbed version. So if you want something that's just a hair heavier, everybody's always trying to look for that little bit of an edge.
That's
and
right.
Fine tune what they need.
Well, man, I really do appreciate you coming on and giving us
absolutely, it was a pleasure.
Giving us some insight on the NSCA and the NRA. And are you going to ever work for another organization with a bunch of letters in front of it?
That's right. I sure hope not. I'd be happy retiring from NRA and heading back to the beach and doing some more fishing and shooting.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing this stuff with us. And where are you going to be next? What shoot you going to next? What big shoot you going to next?
Well, I'll definitely be coincidentally, I was going to go to the East Coast Championship next weekend. We were ready to book our house that my wife found on the water that was a non-refundable deposit, which I'm glad she didn't book because I now have to go on a work trip that just popped up on Saturday and Sunday, and that would have caused some marital distress in the home here. So I'm sad to miss that shoot. I used to go to that shoot, back when Chuck Frazier had that. I would go every year, and I've heard nothing but great things about the range there in North Carolina since. I really wanted to go, but beyond that, I'll definitely be at the U.S. Open, and I'll make sure I go to the Nationals this year. And then I'll be at the Big Seafood Blast at M&amp, and I'll be at the Northeast Regional at M&amp. And outside of that, I decide on the fly where I can go depending on what the schedule looks like. With it not being an election year, I should have a little bit more time, but I keep saying that to myself and it doesn't happen. But just any time I get out there is a good time.
That's right. All right, man. We'll appreciate you coming on, and look forward to seeing you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. We'll see you later.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
See ya. Bye-bye.